I've always been the one who handled our finances. Monthly bills, investments, taxes. These were my domain in our division of household labor. Lauren managed the social calendar, family obligations, and our home's aesthetic. This arrangement worked for 7 years of marriage, until a routine review of our utility bill revealed something that didn't add up. It was a Sunday afternoon in October when I noticed the pattern. I was going through our monthly statements, coffee in hand, spreadsheet open, a ritual I found oddly satisfying. My finger paused on the electricity consumption graph from our power company. Something looked off. Our usage had clear spikes every other weekend. Initially, I assumed it was a reporting error. We had a smart meter installed 6 months prior, part of the city's grid modernization program. Maybe the new system had glitches. But as I compared the dates of these spikes with our calendar, an unsettling pattern emerged. Every spike corresponded exactly to weekends when Lauren visited her mother in Rochester. That made no sense. Our consumption should be lower when one of us was away, especially since I often used these weekends to visit my brother upstate. During those weekends, our house should have been using minimal power, just the background draw of appliances, the security system, maybe the automated thermostat adjustments. Instead, our electricity usage on those weekends was nearly double our normal consumption. I expanded the spreadsheet, cross-referencing Lauren's trips with our power usage for the past 6 months. The correlation was perfect. Every single weekend she went to Rochester, every 2 or 3 weeks, like clockwork, our supposedly empty house consumed more electricity than when both of us were home. My coffee grew cold as I stared at the screen, a strange buzzing beginning in my ears. What could explain this? Had someone been entering our home while we were away? A neighbor? A friend with an emergency key? I logged into our smart meter's detailed usage dashboard, something I'd never bothered to check before. The company had launched this feature that allowed homeowners to see hourly consumption patterns. What I found made my stomach clench. On these weekends, the usage patterns showed activity concentrated in the evenings and nights, spikes consistent with cooking appliances, multiple hours of electricity consumption in our bedroom and bathroom, not the pattern of security lights or automated systems, but the unmistakable signature of human presence. Someone was living in our house when we were gone. I scrolled back through text messages with Lauren, my hands now shaking slightly. For months, the pattern had been consistent. Heading to Mom's, love you. Arrive safe, Mom says hi. Mom's not feeling great, might stay through Monday. But while she was supposedly tending to her elderly mother, our empty house was running the dishwasher, using the electric shower, cooking on our induction stove, running the washing machine. I set my phone down carefully, as if it might detonate if handled roughly. My mind cycled through possible explanations, desperately searching for any interpretation besides the one that seemed increasingly obvious. Perhaps Lauren was secretly returning home, but why lie about staying at her mother's? Perhaps her mother was staying at our house sometimes? But Lauren had never mentioned this, and her mother lived in a comfortable retirement community she rarely left. The most logical explanation was the one I couldn't bear to articulate even to myself. I closed the laptop and walked to our bedroom, opening Lauren's side of the closet. She had left yesterday for one of her weekend visits. I methodically checked her clothing, something I had never done before, noting what seemed to be missing versus what she had packed in her overnight bag. Several of her more provocative outfits, things she rarely wore around me anymore, were absent. They hadn't been in her suitcase when she left. The bedroom suddenly felt airless. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed we had chosen together at a furniture showroom where we had laughed and whispered about which mattress might best support various activities. The bed where I had nursed her through a brutal bout of flu last winter. The bed where someone else had apparently been sleeping while I was away. My phone buzzed with the text, Lauren. Hope you're having a good day. Mom's feeling better. We're going to her favorite restaurant for dinner. Love you. I stared at the message, wondering if anything in our life together had been real. The evidence of betrayal wasn't lipstick on a collar or a mysterious hotel receipt. It was kilowatt hours, data, irrefutable patterns of electricity consumption that told a story she never intended me to read. I had 24 hours until she returned home, supposedly from Rochester. 24 hours to decide whether to confront her with what I had discovered or to dig deeper and learn exactly who had been sharing our home and my wife when I was away. Lauren and I met 9 years ago at a friend's housewarming party. I was immediately drawn to her laugh, uninhibited and genuine in a way that stood out in the carefully cultivated social atmosphere. She was an interior designer with her own small firm, creative in ways that complemented my more analytical nature as an IT systems manager. "You're the first man I've met who actually listens when I speak," she told me on our third date, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "Most guys just wait for their turn to talk." Our courtship was neither whirlwind nor hesitant. We moved at a pace that felt natural, meeting each other's friends, discussing values and future hopes, gradually intertwining our lives. We married 2 years after meeting, a garden ceremony with 100 guests, personally designed by Lauren down to the specific shade of blue in the table runners. The early years were good, better than good. We traveled when we could afford it, established our careers, bought our house in a neighborhood with potential that Lauren helped transform with her designer's eye. We supported each other through professional challenges and family crises. We discussed having children, eventually, though neither of us felt ready to disrupt the comfortable life we had built. The subtle shifts began around our 5th anniversary. Nothing dramatic, no screaming fights or obvious problems, just a gradual cooling, a growing sense of routine where passion had once lived. Sex became less frequent, more perfunctory when it happened. Conversations centered increasingly on logistics rather than dreams or ideas. "This is normal," my married friends assured me when I tentatively mentioned the changes. "The honeymoon phase doesn't last forever. You settle into companionship. It's actually better this way, more sustainable." I accepted this wisdom, focusing on the positives in our relationship. Lauren was reliable, intelligent, kind to my family. We had built a good life together. If something felt missing, a certain emotional intimacy, a sense of being truly known and desired, I attributed it to the inevitable evolution of long-term relationships. Around the same time, Lauren began her regular visits to her mother in Rochester. Margaret had recently moved to a retirement community after her husband's death, and Lauren felt responsible for helping her adjust. "She's struggling with the transition," Lauren explained. "The weekend visits help break her isolation. I can make sure she's eating properly, taking her medications." I supported this arrangement completely. Family had always been important to both of us, and I admired Lauren's dedication to her mother's well-being. The every other weekend schedule was predictable, allowing me to plan time with friends or my brother on those occasions. We developed a comfortable rhythm around these separations. There were signs, in retrospect, that I might have questioned had I not been so committed to our narrative of a successful marriage. Lauren began putting more effort into her appearance before these weekend trips than for our own date nights. Her phone became a more constant companion, often angled away from my line of sight. She seemed more animated when returning from these weekends, a subtle glow that faded as the days at home accumulated. Small changes in our intimacy now took on new significance in hindsight. Lauren had begun declining my physical advances with increasing frequency, citing fatigue or headaches. When we did connect physically, she seemed mentally elsewhere. New boundaries appeared. Certain intimate acts she had previously enjoyed were now off limits, with vague explanations about physical discomfort. I had attributed these changes to the natural ebb and flow of desire in a long-term relationship, perhaps compounded by work stress or the emotional drain of supporting her mother. I had never seriously entertained the possibility of infidelity. Lauren had always expressed contempt for cheaters, referencing her own father's affairs as formative wounds in her childhood. "I know what that kind of betrayal does to a family," she had told me when a mutual friend's marriage ended due to infidelity. "I could never inflict that pain on someone I love." I had believed her completely. The Lauren I thought I knew valued honesty, integrity, loyalty. The Lauren I thought I knew would never construct an elaborate deception involving her recently widowed mother. Yet the data on my screen told a different story. The evidence was not emotional or subjective, it was quantifiable, measurable, undeniable. While I had been trusting and supportive, someone had been using our appliances, sleeping in our bed, consuming electricity in a home that should have been empty. I opened the smart meter app on my phone again, examining the granular details of our power consumption. The usage patterns revealed someone cooking elaborate meals, taking long showers, watching TV late into the night. Not the behavior of an intruder or emergency key holder, but someone comfortably inhabiting our space. The question was no longer whether Lauren was being unfaithful, but who she had brought into our home, into the sanctuary we had built together, and how long this parallel life had been unfolding right under my nose. The methodical part of my brain, the systems analyst who solved complex technical problems for a living, took over as the emotional part threatened to collapse. If I was going to confront Lauren, I needed more than electricity usage patterns. I needed to understand the full scope of the deception. I began with our smart home system. 6 months ago, we had upgraded to integrated controls for lighting, thermostat, and security, all managed through a single app that logged activity. I rarely checked it beyond adjusting the temperature remotely, but now I scrolled through months of data. The security system logs showed regular disarming and rearming during Lauren's supposed visits to Rochester. Not from her phone. Lauren had never bothered to set up the app on her device, claiming technology frustration, but from manual entry of our code at the keypad. Someone knew our security code, someone Lauren had trusted enough to share it. The thermostat history showed manual adjustments during these weekends too. Our system was programmed to maintain energy-efficient temperatures when unoccupied, but the logs showed the heat increased on cold nights or the air conditioning adjusted during warm weekends, someone making themselves comfortable in our supposedly empty home. I moved on to our shared accounts. Lauren and I maintained separate personal checking accounts but shared a joint account for household expenses. The statement showed regular cash withdrawals from her personal account before her Rochester weekends, $200 to $300 each time. Large grocery purchases appeared on our joint credit card on Fridays, when she was supposedly already at her mother's, groceries for two from stores near our home, not in Rochester. I checked our cellular location history next. We shared our locations with each other, a practice that started for safety during her solo drives to Rochester and continued as a convenience. I had never thought to verify her whereabouts before. Now I found chunks of missing data during her weekend trips, periods where her location was unavailable, purportedly due to poor signal or battery conservation. Convenient technical glitches that now seem suspiciously deliberate. By mid-afternoon, my investigation moved from digital to physical. I searched our home with new eyes, looking for evidence of another person's presence. In the guest bathroom, rarely used when we were both home, I found unfamiliar toiletries tucked behind cleaning supplies under the sink. A high-end men's body wash, expensive hair product of a brand I didn't use. In our bedroom closet, I discovered a shoebox containing items Lauren had apparently forgotten to secure, movie ticket stubs for films we hadn't seen together, dated during her supposed Rochester visits. A receipt from a local restaurant time-stamped during one of these weekends. A matchbook from a hotel bar downtown. But it was in Lauren's home office that I found the most damning evidence. Taped under her desk drawer was a key I didn't recognize. It took me 20 minutes of trying various locks before I discovered it opened the bedside table on her side of our bed, a drawer that had never been locked in 7 years of marriage. Inside was a small journal, its pages filled with Lauren's distinctive handwriting. Not a detailed account, but sporadic entries with dates that aligned perfectly with her Rochester weekends. The content was minimal but unmistakable, references to M and their time together, occasional reflections on their relationship, comparisons that made my stomach turn. With M, I feel truly seen for the first time. The intensity with M makes everything else feel colorless. Counting the days until we can be together again. M, not an initial I recognized from her work colleagues or social circle. A carefully anonymized reference to the person who had been sharing our home, our bed while I was away. The final piece came together when I checked our video doorbell history. I had installed it primarily for package delivery verification, but had never reviewed the footage systematically. Now I scrolled back through months of recordings, focusing on the Friday evenings when Lauren was supposedly driving to Rochester. There he was, tall, athletic build, approximately my age, but with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. The timestamps aligned perfectly, arriving Friday evenings after I had left for my brother's, departing Sunday afternoons before either of us returned. In some footage, he carried grocery bags, in others, bottles of wine. Twice, I watched him greet Lauren with passionate kisses as they met outside our front door, neither showing any concern about neighborhood eyes. I downloaded several clips as evidence, my movements mechanical as my mind processed the comprehensive betrayal unfolding before me. This wasn't a momentary lapse or a drunken mistake. This was a methodically orchestrated second life, one that included romantic dinners in our kitchen, showers in our bathroom, intimacy in our bed. By evening, I had compiled irrefutable evidence from multiple sources, but the most important question remained unanswered. Who was M? The journal offered no last name, no identifying details beyond vague references to his work involving clients and presentations. The doorbell footage showed his face clearly, but matched no one I recognized from Lauren's work functions or social media. Then I remembered our digital photo frame, a gift from Lauren's mother, ironically enough, that cycled through pictures from our shared cloud storage. Lauren managed the uploads, adding photos from her phone periodically. I hadn't paid much attention to it recently, but now I accessed the cloud account directly from my laptop. Among hundreds of legitimate photos, family gatherings, vacations, home renovation projects, I found a hidden folder labeled Design Inspiration. It contained dozens of images that had never appeared on our frame. Lauren with a man I now recognized from the doorbell footage, the two of them hiking in parks near our home, cooking in our kitchen, selfies in our living room. One particularly painful image showed them together in our bed, Lauren's smile more radiant than I had seen it in years. The metadata on the earliest photos dated back 11 months. This hadn't been happening for just the 6 months covered by our smart meter data. Almost a year of deception, executed right under my nose. In one of the photos, the man wore a quarter-zip pullover with a corporate logo, Meridian Consulting. A quick LinkedIn search revealed his identity: Michael Brennan, management consultant, Meridian Consulting Group. His profile indicated he traveled frequently for work, but was based in our city. A man whose job naturally required travel, a perfect complement to Lauren's fabricated weekend trips. I sat in our darkened home office, surrounded by digital and physical evidence of my wife's double life, trying to reconcile the Lauren I thought I knew with the woman who had orchestrated this elaborate deception, who had brought another man into our home, not once in a moment of weakness, but systematically over many months, who had transformed my absences into opportunities for a parallel life. The betrayal wasn't just of our marriage vows. It was a violation of our shared space, our sanctuary. Every room now felt contaminated by their presence, every surface potentially marked by their intimacy. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. "Just finished dinner with Mom. She's doing so much better. Coming home tomorrow around 2. Miss you." I stared at the casual lie, sent without apparent guilt or hesitation, and made my decision. I would not confront her immediately upon her return. I would wait until I had processed my own thoughts, until I could approach the situation from a position of emotional stability rather than reactive pain. But I would not pretend ignorance either. The charade had gone on long enough. Tomorrow, when Lauren returned from her fictional visit to Rochester, she would find that the life she had so carefully compartmentalized was about to collapse entirely. Because unlike the subjective nature of emotions or promises, electricity usage doesn't lie, and neither would I, ever again. I spent a restless night moving between our guest room and home office, unable to bear the thought of sleeping in our bed. By morning, I had formulated a plan for the confrontation, not driven by vindictive impulses, but by a need for honesty after months of calculated deception. Lauren's text indicated she would arrive around 2 p.m. I arranged the evidence methodically on our dining room table, printed smart meter graphs, security system logs, doorbell footage stills, photos from the hidden folder, and finally, her journal. Not to ambush her, but to prevent the conversation from devolving into denials or accusations of paranoia. At 1:47 p.m., I heard her key in the lock. I sat calmly at the dining room table, hands folded before me as she called out her usual cheerful greeting. "Hi, honey, I'm home. Mom sent those chocolate cookies you like." When she entered the dining room, grocery bag in hand and smile fixed in place, she froze at the sight of me sitting before the carefully arranged evidence. The bag slipped from her fingers, the sound of breaking cookies punctuating the sudden silence. What is all this?" she asked, though her rapidly paling face suggested she already knew. "Please sit down, Lauren." My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, steady, detached, as if belonging to someone else entirely. She remained standing, eyes darting between the materials on the table and my face. "I don't understand what's happening." "I think you do." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Our smart meter records show interesting patterns on the weekends you're supposedly in Rochester. The house uses more electricity when we're both gone than when we're home." Her posture changed subtly, shoulders tensing, chin lifting slightly, the initial shock giving way to calculation. "There must be some mistake with the system," she attempted, though her voice lacked conviction. "The system is quite accurate, especially when combined with our doorbell camera footage." I turned my laptop toward her, playing a clip of Michael Brennan entering our home with his own key. "You've been bringing him here for almost a year. Every time I visit my brother, every time you're supposedly with your mother." Lauren sank into the chair, her facade crumbling. "David, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I interrupted, surprising myself with my continued composure. "You've been explaining fictional visits to your mother for months. You've become quite skilled at explanation." "It's not what you think," she tried again. "What I think is that you've been having an affair with Michael Brennan from Meridian Consulting for approximately 11 months. What I think is that you've been bringing him into our home when I'm away. What I think is that you've turned your fabricated concern for your mother into cover for a second life." Her eyes widened at my mention of his name and company. "How did you—" "That doesn't matter." I gestured to the evidence before us. "What matters is that you've been lying to me systematically for nearly a year. Not just about your relationship with this man, but about where you've been, what you've been doing, and who you've brought into our home." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. In the past, those tears would have immediately softened me, prompted comfort and reassurance. Now they struck me as part of the performance, the same performance that had allowed her to text loving messages while in another man's arms. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, the words so cliched I almost laughed. "Yet you made choices you knew would devastate me if discovered, repeatedly, for months." I kept my voice level, fighting to maintain the emotional distance that was keeping me functional. "You didn't just betray our marriage vows, Lauren. You violated our home, the one place that should have remained safe from deception." "I fell in love with him," she whispered, as if this explained everything. "That's not an explanation, that's a feeling. An explanation would address why you chose to pursue that feeling at the expense of our marriage. Why you brought him into our home rather than ending our relationship honorably. Why you constructed elaborate lies about caring for your mother, your widowed, grieving mother, to facilitate your affair." Lauren flinched at the mention of her mother. "Mom doesn't know. I do visit her, just not every time I say I do." "So you've been lying to her too, using her as your alibi without her knowledge." I shook my head. "Does Michael know about this arrangement? That your supposed devotion to your mother was actually your cover story?" She nodded slowly. "He knows I'm married. He knows about the Rochester story." "And he was comfortable coming into another man's home, sleeping in our bed, using our utilities?" The academic detachment I'd been maintaining began to crack, anger seeping through the fissures. "Did you two laugh about the convenience of it all? How perfectly our schedules aligned for your deception?" "It wasn't like that," Lauren insisted, a flash of defiance in her eyes. "We didn't plan for this to happen. We met at a client presentation. There was a connection neither of us expected. We tried to resist it, but... Spare me the star-crossed lover's narrative, I cut in. Every choice has alternatives. You could have told me you had feelings for someone else. You could have suggested counseling. You could have asked for separation. Instead, you chose deception, elaborate, sustained deception. For the first time, Lauren seemed to have no ready response. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of shattered trust and broken vows. Why our home? I finally asked, the question that had tormented me through the sleepless night. Of all the places you could have been with him, his place, hotels, anywhere else, why bring him here? Lauren looked down at her hands. It was convenient. He travels for work and doesn't keep an apartment here. Hotels felt sordid, impersonal. While violating our marital bed felt appropriate, the bitterness finally penetrated my voice. She winced. I wasn't thinking clearly. Michael wanted to know my real life, not just stolen moments in anonymous places. And practical concerns made it easier. I could tell you I was at Mom's, tell her I was busy with work, and have uninterrupted time with him. Practical concerns, I repeated. Like utilities. The irony being that your practical solution created the very evidence that exposed everything. Lauren looked up, confusion evident. What do you mean? Your lover used too much electricity, I explained, hearing the absurdity of the statement as I spoke it. Our smart meter recorded every shower he took, every meal he cooked, every light he turned on in what was supposed to be an empty house. Technology revealed what you thought was perfectly concealed. A hysterical laugh threatened to escape me. Of all the ways to discover infidelity, a utility bill seemed simultaneously mundane and bizarre. Not lipstick on a collar or a misplaced text message, but kilowatt-hour consumption patterns. What happens now? Lauren asked softly, vulnerability replacing the calculation in her expression. It was the question I had been asking myself throughout the night. What did happen after a betrayal of this magnitude? After discovering that the person you had built a life with was capable of sustained deception? After your home, your sanctuary, had been violated by the presence of a stranger welcomed by your spouse? I don't know, I answered honestly. I know I can't stay here tonight. This house doesn't feel like mine anymore. I've booked a hotel room. I need space to think. Are you saying we're over? Her voice trembled. I'm saying I don't know if what we had was real in the first place, I replied, the truth of those words hitting me as I spoke them. The woman I thought I married wouldn't have been capable of this level of deception. So either I never really knew you, or you've become someone unrecognizable to me. Either way, I need time to process that reality. I stood, suddenly exhausted by the effort of maintaining composure. I've packed some clothes and essentials. I'll let you know when I'm ready to discuss next steps. Lauren reached for my hand as I moved to leave. David, please, we can work through this. Couples survive affairs all the time. I gently removed my hand from hers. This wasn't just an affair, Lauren. It was a double life. One that turned our home into a staging ground for deception and made me question every moment of the past year. I don't know if that's something anyone can work through. At the doorway, I paused. One more thing. Your mother deserves to know she's been used as your alibi. I won't tell her, but you should. She lost her husband and has been unwittingly participating in the potential dissolution of her daughter's marriage. She deserves better than that. I left without waiting for her response, carrying only a small suitcase and the shattered remains of what I had believed was a trustworthy relationship. Behind me, in the home we had created together, I heard Lauren begin to sob, the sound following me to my car, but not penetrating the strange calm that had settled over me. The confrontation was over. The real challenge, determining what remained of my marriage and my concept of trust, was just beginning. The first week after confrontation passed in a blur of practical logistics and emotional turbulence. I extended my hotel stay twice, unable to face returning to our home despite Lauren's daily texts assuring me she had moved temporarily to a friend's apartment to give me space. Space wasn't my problem. Trust was. Every conversation, memory, and shared experience of our marriage had been cast into doubt by the revelation of her double life. If she could maintain such comprehensive deception about her weekends, What else might have been performance rather than reality? On the third day, I met with a lawyer, not necessarily to begin divorce proceedings, but to understand my options. The meeting was surreal, discussing the potential dissolution of my marriage in the same tone I might use to review a business contract. Given the documented infidelity and the timeline you've provided, you're in a relatively strong position should you decide to file, the attorney explained. However, Connecticut is a no-fault divorce state, so the practical impact of the affair on property division may be limited. I nodded mechanically, making notes about potential next steps, while feeling strangely detached from the conversation. The systematic betrayal had triggered what my hastily found therapist later described as emotional shock, a protective numbness that prevented complete psychological collapse in the face of traumatic revelation. Lauren's communication strategy evolved as the days passed. The initial flood of apologetic texts gave way to more measured emails, acknowledging my need for space while expressing hope for eventual reconciliation. She confirmed she had told her mother the truth, a painful conversation that had apparently resulted in Margaret refusing to speak to her. "Mom says what I've done is worse than what Dad did to her," Lauren wrote, "because at least he never used her as cover for his affairs. I never realized how much additional harm I was causing by involving her in my lies. I'm truly sorry for that, among so many other things." The acknowledgement of the broader impact of her deception seemed like a small step toward genuine accountability, but it did little to address the fundamental breach of trust between us. In my second week at the hotel, I finally met with my brother Ryan, who had been traveling for work when everything imploded. His reaction to my methodical recounting of the discovery and confrontation shifted from shock to rage to protective concern. "You should have called me immediately," he insisted over dinner at a restaurant carefully chosen for its lack of association with my marriage. "You shouldn't be dealing with this alone." "I'm not sure anyone can help me deal with it," I replied. "This isn't just about Lauren being unfaithful. It's about realizing that the person I built my life with was capable of sustained, elaborate deception. How do you process that kind of foundational betrayal?" Ryan had no easy answer, but his presence offered a tether to the person I had been before Discovery Day. The person who had trusted openly, who had believed in the essential honesty of his chosen partner, who had felt secure in his home and relationship. "What do you want to happen now?" he asked as our meal concluded. "Divorce? Reconciliation? Something in between?" "I honestly don't know," I admitted. "Part of me feels like the marriage was effectively over the moment she decided to bring another man into our home. Another part recognizes that people make terrible mistakes that don't necessarily define them permanently. I'm trying to determine which perspective is wisdom and which is denial." By the third week, I had established new routines centered around work, therapy, and essential self-care. I rented a furnished apartment with a month-to-month lease, a transitional space that acknowledged both my inability to return to our home and my uncertainty about permanent decisions. Lauren requested a meeting at a neutral location, whenever you feel ready. After consulting with my therapist, I agreed to coffee at a cafe equidistant from our respective temporary residences. She looked different when she arrived, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes inadequately concealed by makeup. I recognized the physical manifestations of emotional crisis, having observed similar changes in my own appearance. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, hands wrapped around her mug as if seeking warmth despite the mild weather. "I know there's nothing I can say to undo what I've done, but I hope you'll let me try to explain, not to excuse it, but to help us both understand how we got here." I nodded, maintaining the emotional distance that had become my primary protection. "I told myself I was falling out of love with you," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "That our marriage had become routine, passionless. That what I felt for Michael was real in a way what we had wasn't anymore. I constructed a narrative that justified my actions while absolving me of responsibility." She paused, gathering herself. "But that was a convenient fiction. The truth is that I was avoiding the hard work of intimacy. Real intimacy means being vulnerable, communicating difficult truths, risking rejection. The affair provided intensity without vulnerability, all the neurochemical rewards of connection without the challenging work of genuine closeness." Her insight surprised me. It aligned with what my therapist had suggested, that affairs often serve as shortcuts to emotional intensity, bypassing the more difficult path of deepening connection in a long-term relationship. "Why our home?" I asked again, the question that continued to haunt me. "Of all the choices you made, that's the one I struggle with most." Lauren's expression reflected genuine regret. I told myself it was practical, his travel schedule, the convenience of the cover story. But my therapist helped me see the deeper psychology. I was unconsciously trying to integrate these separate parts of my life. Bringing him into our space was a way of normalizing what I was doing, making it feel less like deception and more like an extension of my reality. While completely disregarding my reality, I added, "Yes," she acknowledged. "It was profoundly selfish. I prioritized my desires and justifications over your right to safety and honesty in your own home. I violated the one space that should have remained sacred." We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering territory both practical and emotional. She had ended things permanently with Michael after our confrontation, a decision she insisted was final regardless of what happened between us. She was committed to therapy, both to understand her capacity for deception and to address the underlying issues that had made compartmentalization seem viable. "What do you want now?" I finally asked, echoing my brother's question to me. "I want a chance to rebuild if that's possible," she answered without hesitation. "Not to restore what we had before, that clearly wasn't working for either of us in different ways, but to create something new based on complete honesty and real intimacy. I understand that might not be possible given what I've done. I understand you may not be able to trust me again, and you'd be justified in that position." Her answer held more self-awareness than I had expected. Not a desperate plea for forgiveness or a presumption that reconciliation should be automatic, but an acknowledgement of the severity of the breach and the uncertain path forward. As our meeting concluded, I found myself at a crossroads I had never anticipated in our 7 years of marriage. The path to divorce was clear and justified, potentially offering a clean break from betrayal and the beginning of a new chapter untainted by deception. The path to reconciliation was foggy and uncertain, requiring tremendous effort from both of us with no guarantee of success. "I need more time," I told her as we prepared to leave. "This isn't a decision I can make today or even this month. Whatever happens, I need to rebuild my own sense of reality first." Lauren nodded, tears threatening but contained. "I understand. I'll respect whatever you decide and whatever boundaries you need in the meantime." I watched her walk away, this woman I had loved and trusted, now simultaneously familiar and unrecognizable. The aftermath of betrayal had transformed us both in ways neither could have anticipated. Her through the consequences of her choices, me through the forced reassessment of everything I thought I knew about our relationship. And somewhere in the background of this personal earthquake, a utility bill containing unusual electricity usage patterns sat in my email inbox, the mundane messenger that had delivered the most profound disruption of my adult life. Healing after betrayal, I discovered, isn't linear. It's a messy, recursive process. 2 steps forward, 1 step sideways, occasional plunges backward into fresh pain. There's no clear timeline, no predictable progression through stages. Just an uneven journey toward whatever reconstruction might be possible after fundamental trust has been shattered. My individual therapy became the cornerstone of this process. Dr. Levine helped me understand that my experience constituted a form of relationship trauma, one that impacted not just my marriage but my basic sense of reality and security. When someone close to us reveals themselves capable of sustained deception, she explained during an early session, it challenges our most fundamental assumptions about relationships and safety. The question becomes not just, can I trust my spouse again, but can I trust my own perceptions and judgments? This framing helped explain the persistent cognitive disorientation I experienced. The sense that nothing could be taken at face value, that verification was necessary for even the most basic claims. I found myself fact-checking casual statements from colleagues, double-checking restaurant bills, questioning memories of conversations with friends. The betrayal had contaminated my relationship with truth itself. After 6 weeks in my temporary apartment, I finally returned to our house, our home, to assess whether I could reclaim it as my own space. Lauren had maintained her separate residence, accessing the house only to water plants and collect necessary items, always with advance notice and my explicit permission. Standing in our living room, I experienced conflicting reactions. This was where we had built our life together, filled with memories both authentic and counterfeit. The furniture we had chosen together, the photographs from happier times, the small imperfections we had meant to address someday. But it was also where another man had been welcomed in my absence, where my wife had created a parallel life that excluded me entirely. I walked slowly through each room, confronting the psychological ghosts that lingered. In the kitchen, I imagined them preparing meals together, laughing, sharing wine from our collection. In the living room, I pictured them watching our television, occupying our couch, perhaps discussing me in my absence. In our bedroom, the site of the most intimate betrayal, I stood in the doorway, unable to cross the threshold without a surge of nausea. That night, I slept in the guest room, uncertain whether I could ever reclaim our bedroom as a safe space. The house felt simultaneously mine and not mine, familiar and alien, home and crime scene. 2 months after Discovery Day, I agreed to Lauren's suggestion of couples therapy, not as a commitment to reconciliation, but as a structured environment to address fundamental questions about our relationship. Dr. Shepard, a specialist in infidelity recovery, established clear parameters for our work together. This process isn't about pressuring David toward forgiveness or reconciliation, she explained in our first session. It's about creating space for honest exploration of what happened, why it happened, and what might be possible moving forward. That exploration may lead toward rebuilding the marriage or toward a more constructive separation. Either outcome requires the same foundation of truth. Lauren had continued her individual therapy alongside these joint sessions, working to understand the psychological mechanisms that had allowed her to compartmentalize so effectively. She shared insights from this work with surprising candor. "I've been exploring my family patterns," she explained during our third session. "My father's affairs, my mother's passive acceptance of them, the unspoken agreement to maintain appearances while tolerating deception. I internalized those patterns without realizing it, despite consciously rejecting my father's behavior. When my own marriage began feeling stagnant, I unconsciously followed the template I had absorbed as a child." These insights didn't excuse her actions, but offered context that helped me understand how someone who genuinely opposed infidelity in principle could engage in it so systematically in practice. The gap between stated values and actual behavior wasn't simple hypocrisy. It reflected deeper psychological processes that operated below conscious awareness. 3 months into therapy, we addressed the question of our home, the space that continued to function as a trigger for my most painful reactions. "I can't sleep in our bedroom," I admitted. "I've tried multiple times, but I can't stop imagining what happened there. The house itself feels contaminated by deception." Lauren's response surprised me with its lack of defensiveness. "Then perhaps we should sell it. Whether we stay together or separate, that house represents a chapter that's closed for both of us. Maybe we both need a fresh start in a new space." The suggestion held undeniable wisdom. Neither reconciliation nor divorce would be well served by maintaining a physical environment saturated with betrayal trauma. We listed the house the following week, another concrete step in the ongoing process of dismantling our old relationship to determine what might be salvageable. 4 months after Discovery Day, I experienced my first genuine laugh, a spontaneous moment of mirth during dinner with Ryan and his wife that caught me by surprise. The sound felt foreign after so many weeks of emotional constriction, but it signaled a vital truth. My capacity for joy hadn't been permanently destroyed by betrayal. It had been temporarily suppressed by necessary psychological defenses that were now gradually lowering as I established new foundations of security. "You're starting to integrate the experience," Dr. Levine observed when I shared this moment in therapy, not minimizing it or bypassing the pain, but recognizing that it can coexist with other emotional states. That's significant progress. 5 months into the process, Lauren and I faced the pivotal question that had hovered in the background of all our therapeutic work. Was reconciliation possible? Could a marriage survive such a fundamental breach of trust? Or more specifically, could our marriage survive it? I don't have a universal answer about whether relationships can recover from infidelity, Dr. Shepard told us. Some do, some don't, and the determining factors aren't always what you might expect. The critical questions are whether both partners are willing to do the necessary work, whether the unfaithful partner takes genuine responsibility, and whether the betrayed partner can envision a future where trust might be rebuilt. Lauren had demonstrated consistent commitment to the therapeutic process, maintaining appropriate boundaries without pressure or manipulation. She had acknowledged the full scope of her betrayal without minimization, accepted the consequences with dignity, and articulated insights about her behavior that reflected genuine self-examination rather than performance. The question was whether these positive steps could counterbalance the magnitude of the breach, whether I could ever feel emotionally safe with someone who had proven capable of such elaborate deception. I don't know if I can ever trust completely again, I told Dr. Shepard honestly. Not just Lauren, but anyone. This experience has fundamentally altered how I view relationships and vulnerability. Complete trust may be an unrealistic standard, she replied. Perhaps the question is whether you can develop a new form of trust, one that acknowledges human fallibility and the reality that no relationship comes with absolute guarantees. Can you imagine building a connection based on that more realistic foundation? The question resonated deeper than expected. My pre-betrayal trust had contained elements of naivety and assumption, beliefs about Lauren's character that I had accepted without question. Any rebuilt relationship would require a more conscious, active form of trust, one maintained through ongoing choices and transparency rather than passive assumption. 6 months after Discovery Day, our house sold, a clean break from the physical space that had contained both our genuine connection and Lauren's elaborately orchestrated deception. We divided the proceeds equally, maintaining separate residences while continuing our therapeutic work. The distance from that triggering environment created space for a new phase in my healing process. Without daily reminders of betrayal embedded in my living space, I could assess my feelings about Lauren and our marriage with greater clarity. What emerged was complex but increasingly coherent. I recognized that alongside the pain of betrayal existed genuine care for the person Lauren was working to become, someone more integrated, honest, and self-aware than the woman who had constructed a double life in our home. I acknowledged that aspects of our marriage had indeed become stagnant before the affair, though that stagnation in no way justified her choices. Most significantly, I began to distinguish between forgiveness and reconciliation, recognizing that the former might be possible and even necessary for my own healing, while the latter remained an open question dependent on factors still unfolding. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the betrayal didn't happen or that it wasn't severely damaging, Dr. Levine clarified when I broached this distinction. It means releasing yourself from the consuming fire of anger and resentment that can otherwise define your life moving forward. It's primarily for your benefit, not hers. This perspective liberated something within me, permission to release the burning anger without automatically committing to reconciliation. The two processes could proceed on parallel tracks, each valuable in its own right regardless of our ultimate decision about the marriage. 7 months into our separation, Lauren and I had our first dinner together outside the therapeutic context, a tentative step toward determining whether genuine connection remained possible between us. The conversation flowed more naturally than I had anticipated, touching on our individual growth, professional developments, and cautious reflections on our shared past. I've been thinking about what you said months ago, Lauren offered as our meal concluded, about our home feeling contaminated by my deception. I realize now that what I did wasn't just betrayal of you, but desecration of something sacred, the space we had created together as a sanctuary from the world. I'm not sure I'll ever forgive myself for that specific violation, even if someday you can. Her insight demonstrated a depth of understanding that her earlier apologies had lacked, a recognition of the particular harm caused by bringing her affair into our shared space. It didn't erase what had happened, but it acknowledged a dimension of the betrayal that felt especially important to my experience. 8 months after Discovery Day, I made a decision that surprised both of us. I purchased a small cabin in the woods 2 hours from the city, a retreat space that had never been part of our marriage, untainted by shared history or betrayal associations. "I'd like you to see it," I told Lauren during a therapy session. "Not as a step toward reconciliation necessarily, but as a neutral space where we might continue exploring whether there's a path forward for us. If there isn't, it remains mine alone. If there is, it could represent a fresh start." The invitation represented neither commitment nor closure, but something in between, a willingness to consider possibilities without predetermined outcomes. It acknowledged both the severity of the breach and the meaningful work that had followed, creating space for continued discernment without premature conclusions. The healing process remained ongoing, incomplete, sometimes painfully slow, but the overwhelming chaos of betrayal had gradually yielded to something more structured, a thoughtful assessment of what had been irretrievably lost, what might still be salvageable, and what could potentially be built anew from the rubble of broken trust. 9 months after discovering unusual patterns in our electricity usage, I found myself sitting on the porch of my cabin, watching sunset colors transform the landscape. Lauren had visited earlier that day, our third such meeting in this neutral territory. Each encounter revealed new dimensions of our evolving relationship, neither fully reconciled nor completely severed, but existing in a liminal space of possibility and careful reassessment. My phone buzzed with the text from her. "Thank you for today, for the space to continue this conversation, whatever its ultimate destination. I'm grateful for your willingness to remain engaged in the process despite having every reason to walk away permanently." I considered her message thoughtfully, recognizing both its authentic appreciation and the absence of presumption about our future. The healing wasn't complete, perhaps it never would be entirely, but it had progressed enough to allow clear-eyed evaluation of what remained possible between two people, forever changed by betrayal and its aftermath. 2 years have passed since I discovered my wife's infidelity through a utility bill. 2 years of dismantling and rebuilding, not just a relationship, but my fundamental understanding of trust, authenticity, and resilience. Looking back from this vantage point, I can trace how betrayal transformed me in ways both painful and unexpectedly valuable. The question people ask most frequently is whether Lauren and I stayed together. The answer is both simple and complex. Yes, but in a form neither of us could have imagined before the discovery. We are not who we were. Our marriage is not what it was. The transformation has been comprehensive and ongoing. After 12 months of separation, intensive individual therapy, and couples counseling, we made the deliberate choice to rebuild, not to restore our former relationship, but to create something new on stronger foundations. We formalized this commitment in a private ceremony at the cabin that had become our neutral territory, exchanging vows that acknowledged both our painful history and our commitment to a more authentic future. "I promise to bring my whole self to this relationship," Lauren pledged, no longer compartmentalizing aspects of my identity or needs. "I promise to choose courage over comfort when faced with difficult truths. I promise to earn your trust through consistent actions rather than assuming it as a right. I promise to remain awake to reality rather than comfortable illusion," I responded, "to participate actively in building connection rather than assuming its maintenance, to recognize that trust is an ongoing choice rather than a permanent state." These weren't traditional vows of unending devotion or perfect faithfulness. They were clear-eyed commitments from two people who had confronted the fragility of marriage and chosen to continue despite, or perhaps because of, that knowledge. The wisdom gained through this journey has been hard-won but profound, reshaping not just our marriage but my approach to all relationships. 4 insights stand out as particularly transformative. First, I've learned that trust isn't an all-or-nothing proposition. Before the betrayal, I trusted unconsciously and completely, a state of naive certainty that left me vulnerable to devastation when that trust was broken. Now I understand trust as a spectrum that fluctuates based on evidence and context. This more nuanced approach isn't cynicism, but maturity, recognizing that human beings are complex and fallible, capable of both remarkable integrity and profound deception. Healthy trust requires both faith and verification, my therapist explained during a session marking my first year of recovery. Not anxious monitoring driven by insecurity, but appropriate awareness that protects your well-being while allowing vulnerability to develop where earned. This balanced perspective has liberated me from both blind faith and paralyzing suspicion, allowing for connection that acknowledges human complexity without demanding perfection. Second, I've recognized that safety in relationships comes not from certainty but from resilience, knowing that I can survive betrayal if it occurs again. The devastation I experienced upon discovering Lauren's affair was compounded by my belief that such a breach would destroy me completely. Having weathered that storm and rebuilt my sense of self, I now approach connection from a position of greater strength. I could never have imagined surviving this kind of betrayal, I told my brother during a conversation about my healing journey. Now I know I can endure even what once seemed unsurvivable. That knowledge doesn't make me reckless with trust, but it does make me less fearful of vulnerability. This paradoxical resilience, born from the very wound I most feared, has become an unexpected gift of the betrayal experience. Third, I've developed a deeper understanding of compartmentalization, both its dangers and its allure. Lauren's ability to maintain separate realities initially seemed incomprehensible to me, evidence of a character defect I couldn't fathom. Through our therapeutic work, I've come to recognize compartmentalization as a common human tendency that exists on a spectrum from normal boundary setting to pathological disconnection. We all compartmentalize to some degree, Lauren reflected during a couples session in our second year of rebuilding. The danger comes when those compartments become so separate that we lose integrity, literally, the integration of our various selves into a coherent whole. This insight has prompted ongoing work for both of us, conscious efforts to maintain integration across different domains of our lives, to resist the temptation of convenient separation that can facilitate deception of self and others. Finally, I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single decision, but an ongoing process, one undertaken primarily for my own liberation rather than the transgressor's benefit. Early in my healing journey, I viewed forgiveness as a binary choice, either absolving Lauren completely or holding the betrayal against her permanently. Neither approach felt adequate to the complexity of the situation. Forgiveness is often misunderstood, Dr. Levine explained. It doesn't mean pretending the betrayal didn't matter or that it caused no lasting harm. It means choosing not to allow resentment to consume your life moving forward. It's compatible with maintaining appropriate boundaries and requiring accountability. This nuanced understanding has allowed me to release the burning anger that threatened to define my post-betrayal existence without pretending the injury wasn't significant or that trust could be instantly restored. Lauren's transformation has been equally profound. Through sustained therapeutic work, she has confronted the psychological patterns that enabled her compartmentalization, developed greater integration between her various selves, and cultivated the courage to address difficulties directly rather than seeking escape through deception. The affair was a failed attempt to meet legitimate needs through illegitimate means, she reflected after 18 months of recovery work. The needs themselves, for passion, novelty, feeling truly seen, weren't wrong. The deception I used to pursue them caused tremendous harm to someone I genuinely loved. I'm learning to honor my needs while maintaining integrity in how I seek their fulfillment. This level of self-awareness represents significant growth from the woman who once justified elaborate deception as falling in love or following her heart. The capacity to distinguish between valid emotional needs and destructive methods of addressing them has been central to her recovery, and to my ability to consider rebuilding with her. Our relationship today bears little resemblance to the marriage that existed before Discovery Day, where we once maintained a carefully curated image of success with underlying disconnection. We now prioritize authentic communication over comfortable harmony. Where we once assumed continuity without active investment, we now recognize the fragility of connection and the necessity of ongoing renewal. The utility bill that revealed Lauren's betrayal ultimately exposed much more than her infidelity. It revealed the insufficiency of our previous approach to intimacy, the dangers of prioritizing appearance over authenticity, and our mutual participation in maintaining a relationship that looked better than it felt. The affair was ultimately a symptom, not the primary disease, Dr. Shepard observed in one of our final couples sessions. Not a symptom that justified the destructive treatment Lauren chose, but a manifestation of disconnection that had developed between you. Addressing only the infidelity without examining that underlying disconnection would leave you vulnerable to different but equally damaging outcomes in the future. This framing, the betrayal as symptom rather than isolated event, has helped us approach rebuilding with appropriate focus on foundational issues rather than simply adding monitoring mechanisms to prevent recurrence of the specific betrayal behavior. For those facing similar discoveries of infidelity or betrayal, I offer these reflections not as a prescription but as permission to trust your own timeline for healing, to acknowledge the full scope of the injury without shame about its impact, to consider reconciliation without feeling naive or separation without feeling vindictive. The path forward after betrayal isn't universal. For some, rebuilding trust becomes possible through sustained effort and transformation on both sides. For others, the healthiest choice is mindful separation that honors what was valuable in the relationship while acknowledging its insurmountable breach. Neither path is inherently superior. Each represents a valid response to a complex situation that defies simplistic judgment. What matters most is the commitment to authenticity throughout the process, refusing convenient fictions that minimize harm or enable premature closure, remaining awake to difficult realities while open to genuine growth, honoring your own experience without surrendering to the identity of permanent victim. The final irony of this journey is that the very technology that facilitated Lauren's deception ultimately ensured its discovery. The smart meter that recorded electricity usage in our supposedly empty home revealed patterns that could not be explained away, data points that contradicted the carefully constructed narrative she had maintained for months. In an age of increasing surveillance and diminishing privacy, perhaps the most valuable lesson is that authenticity offers freedom that deception cannot provide. Not freedom from accountability or difficult conversations, but freedom from the exhausting maintenance of separate realities, from the constant vigilance required to sustain elaborate lies. The utility bill that changed everything now sits in a file box in my office at the cabin, a reminder of how mundane the messenger of life-altering truth can be. Alongside it rests a framed photograph taken on our second anniversary of rebuilding, Lauren and I on the cabin porch, our expressions reflecting neither naive happiness nor bitter resignation, but something more complex and hard-won, clear-eyed hope tempered by lived experience. This is the unexpected gift that emerged from the ruins of betrayal, not restoration of what was lost, but creation of something more authentic than what existed before. Not blind trust, but conscious connection. Not comfortable illusion, but sustainable reality. If you're navigating your own experience of betrayal, please know that healing is possible, not as a return to previous innocence, but as transformation into something stronger, more genuine, and ultimately more valuable than what existed before the painful revelation. The path isn't linear or predictable, but it's available to those willing to remain engaged with both the pain of what was lost and the possibility of what might still be created. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonates with your experience or offers perspective you find valuable, please consider sharing it with others who might benefit from knowing they're not alone in navigating the complex aftermath of betrayal. Your comments about similar experiences or questions about healing after infidelity are welcome. This community has become a source of strength for many walking paths similar to mine.